Today, I will present you the reason why I wrote this book, Software Development Without Chaos. After a decade or more as a tech lead, team lead, lead developer, whatever title you want to put on me, I started to identify patterns, especially incoherence between product and development. So I decided to write this book. I think in here I put some light on the problem. I think nowadays, even with AI, this problem is still not solved because it's a human problem. It's alignment, it's communication, it's it's converging on the same page at the same time as understanding the full software development life cycle as a machine that it can be configured depending on the business needs. And I realized after all these years that the software development life cycle was something that was created bit by bit instead of being thought as a whole thing. Actually, it's a machine that you have some inputs, you configure the machine, and then based on the configuration, you get some outputs. It sounds pretty straightforward, but it's probably one of the most complicated things to do, especially when the different disciplines have to be, kind of confiscated in one single team that produces one single output. So I decided to write this book. I think it's very helpful for me, to think as a framework, having a method to present. And this is not just a method I created on the air in vacuum, because I tested this method in real practice and it works. The problem is not the method, or it's not the framework, it's not bad code, it's the holistic understanding of the software development life cycle as a machine that can be configured by the people that actually can leverage its power to make that happen. You know. Let me move to the next slide. Yeah, for the majority of the CEOs, CTOs, CIOs, or any C-suite person that I work for, um, the software development lifecycle was like a black box. It was a message thrown to product turned that into something kind of actionable by the development team, and then the development team took that without not knowing whether it was needed a solution, an experiment, or it was a full-fledged system that required production ready from the first day and compliance, etc. So there was like, from the CEO perspective, I just want to put an input on a black box and then somehow getting an output that I can actually use to demo clients or to make it work, to get some revenue, that kind of stuff. As it says here, requirements enter without sufficient clarity. This is not the fault of product. This is probably the nature of the software development lifecycle. But there are a lot of ways to address this issue without saying, okay, we don't know, let's try it out. You can think of this as experiments, spikes, solutions. The different mindset that you put on yourself when you start or face these implementations changes completely the architecture of the team, the topology of the team, and the tools needed to show the solution. For instance, if I'm creating an experiment or a solution, I'm not going to be thinking whether we can scale this to 1,000 users, or whether we are going to have 3 different teams working on this, or whether I can reuse some part of my code base. It's an experiment. I need to validate the experiment, and then I need to grow the experiment. But at some point, I need to realize that there must be some kind of migration, or putting some eyes on top of the technicality of that code if we want to turn that into production ready. But We need to also remember from the product perspective that once we start to creating an MVP, turning an MVP into a full-fledged scalable product, it doesn't happen from night to day. That doesn't work that way. And keeping quality code while you are doing an experiment, it doesn't pay off either. Because the best way or the best approach, especially what I mentioned in my book, is to differentiate between project of type A and type B. I don't use MVP because that word is not, or phrase, or I don't know, it's not. It doesn't describe very well what I describe in my book. Type A projects are the type of projects that you are kind of going to throw away. Are the kind of projects you put people to try things out, that you want a speed. So if you focus on a type A project, it means that you want a speed, you want a market fit, you want to extract product value. You are on the product discovery side of the software development lifecycle. Once you are on a type B project, you don't longer have that mindset and you start creating a product. A product requires scalability, maintainability, all the five pillars of a good architecture, unit infrastructure, etc. If you build an MVP with a mindset of a type B, let's say type A project with a mindset of type B, you lose the speed that is going to help you finding market fit, getting the right feedback at the right time, putting that solution in front of the right people, etc. And if you start the type B project with the type A or MVP mindset, you are creating something that is not going to scale, because technically it's not possible to scale quickly or to produce a quality software, because you think that you can throw enough details or enough clarity to someone to type some code while you are trying to create a product, and you don't want to shoot on your own foot because a product is it's not that dynamic. It cannot be changed as much unless you put a good architecture in it from the day one. And that's another topic, why you are going to talk about architecture when you are creating an MVP. You just want something that works to put in front of your client and creating a demo. But in a type B project, that's probably the first question you need to answer. Are you going to follow hexagonal, monolith, domain-driven design? Which is the infrastructure you are going to use? How you are going to deploy this, whether on-premises, serverless, etc. You have a lot of non-functional requirements that need to be defined before you even start with the system, or type B project. But when you start with a type A project, you don't need to define all this. All these things can emerge as you go. But what is the problem, and what this slide shows us, and what is the clarity that brings the book on top of this, is that the software development lifecycle should not be or must not be a black box. It's something that you can configure depending on what you need from your business perspective. If I am a CEO of a company and I face a project and I say I need to find market fit for this product, I will forget completely type B projects. I will straight go to type A projects. I will try to gain speed, put a developer to try a different solution. I don't care about the quality code. I just care about that it works. I want to put that in front of my clients, being able to show demos. But then the problem is when the same CEO, this is not my case, but the same CEO, once the product is working and has a couple of clients, and then the CEO comes and say, okay, we need to scale this to a full-fledged development. This needs to scale. Okay, you are going to pay a very high price if you want to do that, because you cannot turn something that helps you go faster and find market fit into a full-fledged system without paying the technical debt that you created that helped you with the speed. That's just forgetting where you are coming from. You're coming from a place that you probably never had a conversation about technicality. You just said, I need this to work. I need to show this. This is a very simple thing, but I'm not saying that CEOs don't get this. They get this. The problem is the misalignment between what product things they are doing, what the development is actually doing, because the very big misalignment I found always is like this. Product says, I want to build this. Then the software development team says, okay, when do you want it? I want it for Friday. The software development team assumes that this is a type A project without telling exactly that to the product team. And then the CEO presents this information. The product and development team are completely misaligned. And then the CEO shows the product and starts selling. I want 5 users in this platform. I think what it does is really cool, blah, blah, blah. Selling, what happens? The product says, okay, I need to put 10 more features on top of this. And this for Friday. And the product people start thinking that the speed of development is the same as if they were creating a system, because before it was fast. And they are now thinking that something that it works is not longer an MVP. It's a production-ready product that can be extended to not only be shown in a demo, but also getting clients. There's a complete misalignment between product and development. And the CEO, the founder, is right in the middle, paying the price of that misalignment. Because for the CEO and the founders, most of them, this is a completely black box, and they don't get the problem that both teams are completely misaligned. And this is the problem of the black box, 100%. If you align product approach with technical approach, and you decide whether you are building type A and type B project, and you align the same team, you don't need to hire or fire people. You just need to put the product person knowing that it's a type A project and the developer knowing that it's a type A project, and both looking at the project with the same eyes. And then the CEO presenting that product or that demo to the customer, having that same perspective that it's a type A project. Then there's no misalignment. You have a lot of speed, you have market fit, you don't waste your time, you don't waste your money, and you know that you can or cannot scale, you know which parts can be extracted or not, and you know that the development speed, you are not assuming that the speed that you get from an MVP is the same as you're going to get with the system. That's not the case. It is never the case, And if you don't understand this, you are trapped in a black box. The next slide is the core insight. Most software chaos is not caused by coding alone. Business scores, unclear shifting, product discovery shift or rushed, architecture does not match business model, processes look agile but lack real clarity. Chaos usually appears when business goals, product discovery, architecture, team structure, and delivery process are misaligned. The code might be clean, but the system is not. In my experience, and what is in the book, is I found this pattern in many places where there was a lot of misalignments, but not in what product wanted. Product wanted something pretty crystal clear. The problem was how to translate that into technical aspect, and I'm not just meaning code. Are we writing clean code? Yes or no? It doesn't matter. If you are not building a proper architecture with proper code styles, we need to think any project is going to grow over time, and it's going to need many people over time. It's going to need its own language over time. So you are not building something for yourself if you are building a project, a type B project. You are building something that is bigger than yourself. So documentation, training, understanding, even with AI, people need to understand the software. You need to guide, you need to direct AI, you need to do the same thing with people. You need to make sure people understand what AI is doing, what's the next step, how things were coded, what's the code style guide. Nowadays you can put all these details on AI, and AI will follow most of them. But even with AI, the human factor within a software development team is not zero. You still have developers, you still have product owners, you still have QAs. You need these kind of people to guide the AI to develop software. And if they are not aligned, the architecture is not aligned, if this software development life cycle is not properly configured in order to ship the value that you need to your clients in the time you need it for the market fit, you are dead before even starting. And how to align all these things. Basically, it's always, I always derive everything from cost, from return of investment. But I have probably an advantage that I know how much things cost, because I am technical. Someone that is not technical will know this. Basically, with this heuristic about thinking about a type A and type B project, you can just asking the question whether you are on type A or type B project, you can configure the software development lifecycle in a way. For instance, you don't need to be technical to know that if you are talking about a type A project, you don't need to talk about architecture. You don't. There's no need to talk about that. You just need to leave a developer that knows enough about the project that can build something that works for you to demo, show, find market fit. I'm talking to a startup. Even if you are in a corporation and you are on top of a system, but you are trying something out on top of a system, you just need to leave a developer. You don't ask whether that developer is producing great or bad code. You just need to try things out. It's not going to be part of the last or the end product. And you know, but here there is a mistake also, probably is going to appear in the future slides, but people, especially products, sometimes even when they are working on type B or type B projects, they mistake what is starting small with taking shortcuts. This is a very big mistake. This is part also of the misleading part of the misalignment, and it's also something that creates this sensation for the CEOs and the founders that they are working with a black box. Because the problem is, imagine you are a CEO or a founder and you create, this is a typical problem. It happened to me more than 5 times in my career. You create a page with a set of rows, and then what happened if you do the shortcut? The shortcut, you can ask the front-end developer to hard code a list of 10 items on the front end, and then suddenly we'll ask, okay, what about if I add 11 items? It's not going to work. Even if you add, I'm going to create an endpoint that is just only going to show you the first 10 items from the database. That's a shortcut. That's not starting small. Starting small is when you paginate a backend, but you just show the first 10 results on the front end. Starting small means that you are doing the right thing, but you are cutting the corners to just do something that is going to show you on your screen and show some results so you can navigate and show off your demo. But it's not going to work if you have 100 records. You still need to go through development if you want to extend that. But you can see that if I add 10 records with already paginated response, and I don't implement that in the front end, probably don't implement that in the back end is good too. But hard coding that in the front end and then wanting to extend the pagination when there was never pagination in place, then that's a problem, because the CEO will ask, well, I asked the product team or the development team to create this with pagination last week or with 10 items. Why in the hell you haven't introduced pagination? Basically because the team wasn't aligned and the CEO is expecting a system. Product thought that they will be asking for a system, but they asked to create this in 2 days, and then development decided that because they were just requested this in the next 2 days to take some shortcuts and just hard code the 10 results on the front end. And then the product review went well because they saw these 10 records. They didn't ask further questions, and then this went for a demo. And then everything exploded because whenever they wanted to see the 11th element on the screen, it never worked. And then when they came back to the team said, okay, but we need a week to implement that, and we need to undo most of the work that we've done because we just did it in the front end. We need to do the back end, and then product starts thinking, okay, but we just thought this would cost us $10 or I don't know, 10 hours of development, and you are now coming back with 100 hours of development. Yes, because we took shortcut. Okay, this is where things exploded. This is where you as a CEO or a founder will feel yourself like working with a black box, that you are just bleeding money every month and you have no clue what's going on. The problem is the whole misalignment between CEO or C-suite, product and development. They have no clue what each other are doing, and they don't have the understanding of what's the difference between starting small or taking shortcuts. You know, this is the core insight. You know, you need to align and you need to configure your software development machine in order to produce the output that you want, whether it's a type A or type B project, and having the right conversations based on the type of project and not deviating from that. And you can create many different software development life cycles depending on the project or the solution or the experiment you are trying to deliver to the market. And everything, you know, like is kind of dropping from this return of investment and what business needs and what the CEO is asking for, but from, you know, grasping that business aspect, not just thinking on how we are going to provide this technically. Because you know what it happens, you know your team is misaligned when developers are working on tickets. A product is designing something in vacuum, and the CEO is presenting something that is a mixture of these two complete different worlds. You know, it's not like development collaborating with product to discover and creating something that shows to the CEO, and then the three of them are aligned so the demo goes well and everyone is understanding what they are creating and what they are selling. These three pieces are disconnected and everyone is doing his job, but they are not enough aligned in order to produce a single output. And the CEO and the founder who are paying for this, they are just facing the problem. They are just working with a black box. And this will work the same with the AI, because it's the problem where you are creating a human machine configuration. The machine, you know, the machine will always work because it's configured by people, but whenever you introduce people within the machine, then you have the problem because you are not configuring the people. You are saying, okay, you are the product owner and you are the product owner for all this project, for all this product, and we have different initiatives within the same project, and you are the single product owner. That product owner is probably going to take every single project the same, when they are not the same. There are experiments, there are solutions, and there are products. They are completely different things. Let's go to the next. The framework. Software development is a machine you can configure. The software development lifecycle should be designed around the desired output, not copied from generic agile rituals. Every company has a purpose. Input, output, software development lifecycle. When the machine is configured correctly, the output matches the business intention. When it is not, even talented teams produce the wrong results. You know, this is probably what I was saying before, but you know, the framework is exactly that. You know, it is a machine. A machine is composed, but the kit approach the team is taking in order to produce the software, it is taken by the number of columns and the type of columns you have in your Kanban or on a Scrum board. It's whether you choose a Scrum or Kanban. The machine is also affected by who is within the machine. It's a front-end developer, it's a full-stack developer, it's a back-end front-end developer, you have a UX designer, is product part of that team. You know, the people, the roles within that machine are going to affect drastically the output of that machine. You need to create a machine by per intention. You know, I just want to, you know, produce a solution that will do X, Y, or Z. I just want to demo next week and blah blah blah. Whenever you are, you know, proposing that intention from the return on investment, you have of course you always have trade-off, but you always want the most cost-effective solution as a CEO or as a founder. You want to get to your result faster, not better. You want to get faster. You can get better, but it's not going to cost you zero. It's going to cost you more. And then you need to find a balance. And the machine is always balancing. There is a very famous book that is Team Topologies. Team Topologies, for instance, is a book that talks about this. And when I'm mentioning this book is because the book is not trying to find the perfect configuration of team that is going to give you the best outcome ever possible. No, it's telling you how you can organize your teams in order to get the best out of them, even if they are rotating people, moving people, changing project, etc. Is that you can and especially the Conway's law, which is probably the law that book is around that law. It's like your software equals the organization. So that's so true. I'm probably saying the same thing with a slightly different way of describing it, but actually it's exactly the same. The topology of the team is going to affect the software development lifecycle. In team topologies, they don't talk about whether you choose Scrum or whether you use Kanban, Git flow, fork flow, trunk-based development, etc. But my book extends this beyond the team topologies, uses team topologies in order to, describe the different topologies that need to be used depending on the type of project, but also the tools and the strategies or tactics using within the software development lifecycle are also as vital as the different roles that you can introduce in each of them and the type of project you are putting. It's like you have different ingredients and you need to put the necessary ingredients within the team in order to produce your outcome. But everything needs to start from the intent, and these three pieces, CEO, product, and development, need to be aligned on the intent. And especially everyone needs to be aligned on the return of investment based on the solution, experiment, or product. Type A or Type B project, actually. Project types. Not every software project needs the same machine. That's so true. One of the biggest mistakes is treating experiments and scalable systems as they require the same process, the same investment, and the same team structure. They are not. Type A MVP experiment. Fast validation is the priority. Low initial investment, lightweight process, learning is the goal. So you tailor your machine, you optimize your machine for learning. You don't optimize the machine to serve the demand to scale. That's a completely different thing. Then you have the Type B, scalable system. Reliable and stability are the priority. Higher quality standards, QA, DevOps, and solid architecture serving real demands is the goal. But also, there are certain aspects when you decide whether you go with Type A or Type B that are out of your control as a CEO or a founder, and most companies that I work for, they completely ignore that. For instance, if you are a finance company trying to get into the finance market or the finance industry, that's a very highly regulated industry. You can go with an MVP, but at some point pretty early, you will need to start creating a Type B system right away, because you need to be compliant. You are going to face regulations. You are going to face, especially that is a pretty described industry. You change business models, you change product by changing ingredients, but you are not reinventing the wheel every time that you create a financial product. There are plenty of them. They are driven by money. Everything is kind of numbers, transactions. So I am not saying you cannot innovate in that industry, but it's a pretty well-defined thing. You need to go from where the money is coming from, when the money is coming from, who is the owner of that money. So there are certain properties that and processes that were there for always, and they are regulated. So Type B projects are pretty likely. But if you are creating a marketing application, for instance, you want to try out things, how to help better your customers, you are not that regulated, you just want to get feedback quickly. So creating a Type B project is probably when you start having users, or when you want to start scaling the product to make it profitable, or whenever you are getting investment that actually helps you to build that system that's going to help you to create that SaaS. But at the beginning, everything will be kind of an experiment or an MVP, So this is, you need to be very careful with this. Common mistake, the hybrid trap creates the worst of both worlds. Trying to be fast and cheap like an MVP while also being robust and scalable like a production system often creates software that is slow, unstable, and expensive. Contradictory goals, too heavy to validate, fragile architecture, technical debt, too heavy to validate quickly, too fragile to scale reliably, too much hidden technical debt, teams receive contradictory goals. This is exactly the problem described, probably in different bubbles. This is what happened in most of the companies that I work for, it's the weather in a company, it's the politics, it's the beneficiaries. Sorry, it's it's the company configuration, it's the culture, but this always creates these four frictions, these points of friction that lead to the misalignment that create this problematic software development life cycle. So if you think from the business perspective, too heavy to validate quickly. The business owner knows with 100% clarity whether they want to validate quickly something or not. They really know that. The problem is down the line, product development, they lose that clarity. Too fragile to scale reliably. The CEO, whenever he sees something working, he thinks that it's scalable reliably, because upwards from the development that wasn't communicated properly. That probably the MVP is not reliable, scalable. Too much hidden technical debt. The CEO has no clue at all about the technical debt and what that means, because they don't know where the team cut corners, because they are in a completely different page. They don't distinguish between cutting corners or starting small. So this creates probably this is the most black box word or term for a non-technical CEO or founder: technical debt. The technical debt is whatever your team did that consciously or unconsciously that you will have to pay because they make that mistake. But not they make that mistake because they don't know how to do their job. It's because this misalignment created a mistake, but now you are paying for it. Teams receive contradictory goals. Yeah, we need a system for tomorrow. That's the biggest contradictory goal I always got from the product team, from the CEO. They just want something that works and is scalable for tomorrow. That will never be the case. If you ask those things, the development team is going to prioritize, not being fired and not contradict you because you are the CEO and the founder, and they are going to give you an MVP, and you are going to think that is a scalable product, and everything's going to explode on your face. Discovery plus delivery. Build the right thing, then build it right. This is probably the biggest misalignment that you can find within the machine, because the machine doesn't differentiate, in most of my experience, the difference between product discovery and product delivery. They are completely different worlds, but they need to collaborate each other while they are producing, the outcome. This is a pretty, I would say counterintuitive thing, because people tend to think that they are two completely different processes, because you have product discovery, then product delivery. But this is not the case. They overlap all the time. But they need to be clear. They need to have clear in their minds what's the intent they are working for. You can have 5 different members working in 3 different projects, that one is a solution, one is an experiment, and one is a scalable system. And these 3 can coexist within the exact same system, because the system is a reliable, scalable system that is receiving a solution from one of the developers and is receiving an experiment from another developer. And then the same product owner is driving these 3 different initiatives that are 3 different types of products. That's the overlap that you need. That's the approach that you need. That's the different way of configuring the software machine, the software development lifecycle machine, to produce the outcome that you want. The problem is when you have a one product owner that delivers these 3 kinds of product in the exact same way with the exact same Kanban board. And for instance, you want to ship something pretty quick that is a solution or an experiment, but you need to go through the entire pipeline for an entire system and 6 hours of QA. You get all your speed for market fit completely destroyed, because you are treating every single thing as a bloody system when they are not. So you need to still be able to find market fit with an experiment on top of a system. Otherwise you are screwed, because if you assume that as a structural, as part of your team, you are assuming that as you grow, you are reducing your capacity to validate stuff, and that's reducing your capacity to be a startup, and any new startup is going to beat you over time, because they are fast, and you are losing the fastest of your development team as you grow. That's probably the biggest mistake that I've seen over time. Product discovery and software delivery are not isolated phases. They are two gears that must constantly inform each other. When they operate in silos, waste and reward multiply. Discovery clarifies the problem and validates assumptions. It's like you cannot go to the delivery phase or you cannot deliver something to a developer if you don't have the clarity to execute that. You need to validate the assumption, but not by developing it. You need to validate your assumptions, let's say, for instance, an API, by requesting the API, not coding on top of an API to see whether it works. No, you are far beyond the validation when you are doing that. Delivery creates working software and generates real feedback. Yeah, when you create the software, you actually get the feedback. But the problem is, you need to define how you are going to deliver that software and to who and when and how. That's the software development machine. You might think that I'm just complicating a lot of stuff and configuring that machine takes a lot of work. No, I'm configuring the machine on my head right now as I told to you. It's not that hard. You just need to have your receipts on your head. If you want to go fast, for instance, in a project that is a system, do trunk-based development. Don't waste long releases. Have different tracks to get to production. Don't use Git flow as your main Git strategy and then use the hotfix approach to deploy your features to production because you think that that's your fast door to production rather than the hotfix. That's not the way you need to think on this. Because I saw that happening. Feedback loops reduce waste and rework. Yeah, but the feedback loops is not I deliver this to production and then I figure out. No, the feedback loop is within product and development. They need to have quick feedback loops. Product can see something that is dirty and seeing whether the developer is going in the right direction. This is pretty much extreme programming, but instead of two developers, a product person and a development person. That's exactly the same. That is string programming from product programming, I will call it. Clear requirements prevent developer from guessing. Yeah, but you don't need to define everything upfront for the developer. You need to collaborate with the developer as a product person. Otherwise, the developer is going to guess, what is not described, and then the developer will say, okay, but we need to extend, the validation in order for me to not guess. No, you don't need to extend the validation to prevent guessing. You need to collaborate. That's going to remove validation and guessing, and they are going to be in the balance, and you are going to get the best from both. Actually the best of that the people can actually produce those people. What the book covers, the book removes the fog from software development. The goal is not to turn CEOs into developers. The goal is to help them make better technical and strategic decisions with clarity and confidence. Know when to build an MVP, validate fast without over-engineering. Know when to invest in architecture, scout with intention, not by accident. Understand team structure and roles, align organization with type of work. Reduce hidden technical debt, see it before it becomes a crisis. Improve predictability and return of investment. Deliver quality software on time and on budget. This is the book, extends on all this. I describe some, experiences that I have at the beginning of the book, and then I create this framework, and I also mention, the typical tactics that you use, the 5 whys, the postmortem, I embed in that domain-driven design, a team topologies. The problem with this kind of approaches, that most of the development teams or most of the technical people, you are as a CEO, as a founder, you are not going to read team topologies. You are not going to read domain-driven design. You maybe want the result that people that created those books and the bigger companies that use those books are claiming they get as a benefit of implementing that. But the timing on when introduce those tactics, strategies in your team are really key, are actually the main point. If you are starting a company and you want to go domain-driven design, you are shooting on your own foot from the day one. If you are treating your 3 developer team into, and you are thinking team topologies, you are shooting your own phone. The timing on when introducing these tactics is key. Going Git flow, going trunk-based development. You as a CEO, you don't need to know all these things, but you need to understand whether you are going into type A or type B project. And if you are not going as fast as you need for a type A project, then you have a technical you have a misalignment within your team, and you need to figure out whether it's product that is not understanding that you want a type A project, or is the development team that is not understanding the type A, or maybe there is some misalignment or contradiction, as we mentioned before, in the software development process. So you need to be very clear that it's not hiring more developers, it's not bringing more clarity, putting more money, creating infrastructure, or talking about architecture. It's aligning what you already have. Closing, before you accelerate, diagnose the machine. If your software team is slow, expensive, or unpredictable, the first question is not how do we code faster. Most people are asking, we need AI. No, you don't need AI. AI is going to skyrocket and speed up your terrible processes, and it's going to create even more ambiguity, and it's going to even more disalign your teams. It is the development machine configured for the right outcome. Software development without chaos is a framework for diagnosing that machine and redesigning it for clarity, speed, and business value. Diagnose. Understand what is actually broken. This is what I just said before. You need to understand where is the misalignment happening. But you are going to intuitively see that, or feel that when you are paying 60K a month and the team is not moving, and you just want to type a project, and you are asking what the hell is going on. And then you need to diagnose that, because you don't need more people, you don't need more architecture, you don't need to address technical depth. You need to diagnose the problem. Configure, align processes, team, and architecture. This is the part when you diagnose that, you start understanding where the misalignment is. And instead of forcing people to follow you or to change forcibly into a different way of working, you just need to create the necessary structure and incentives, and put the right incentives for people to create the necessary structure to emerge. The software development life cycle is something that emerges after you put certain practices in place. Like, we are going to follow Kanban and we are going to do trunk-based development. Once you just decide those two things, you are putting the incentives on delivering faster. At least getting more throughput than probably impact. What do you want more throughput? Let's do Kanban. You want more impact? Let's do Scrum. Which one is the risk mitigation framework you want to use? Because those are risk mitigation frameworks. They are not just a bunch of rituals. Deliver predictable software with business value. With business value means that you never, this is probably one of the most important parts that product people need to, drag from CEOs and from clients towards development. It's like you never have to lose in the process, in the software development life cycle, the user value you are creating all the time, and the why, because that is going to help everyone to be aligned. That's the main problem of the software development life cycle. At some point, people lose what's the why behind the functionality, and they get 3-4 different technical tasks, and then you end up with 25 tasks that they all together compose one single user value. Why you don't describe that as a user value, why you don't describe that as why we are doing that, and you deliver that to your product team, and the product team discuss that with the technical team, and they do each their job. But once you deliver that piece, that unit of work, you know that you are increasing in user value. You are not just delivering technical tasks that somehow turn into user value. So that's everything I wanted to say. If you want to get more in detail, probably read the book. I just wanted to do an introduction and using this as a portfolio item for me, explaining all my experience and the way I think, and where you can find the way I think more structured. If you feel that this is you, I describe your scenario, probably once or even more than once during this video, contact me. I can help you with the diagnose. I think that will be the first step, and I can help you also with your team, with my team, to scale and to produce the software at the speed you need. You will never get the software delivered at the speed you want, even with AI. But you need to deliver certain software at a certain speed in order to continue alive within the market. I know that. And you're burning money and you have a runway, and you need to protect that because you need to get revenue before you run out of runway. So contact me if you really need to think, you really feel that you need a diagnostic to your team, and I will be very happy to do it. That's it.